Rain didn't simply fall on Manhattan that night. It pressed down on it. It wrapped the city in a wet, shimmering silence that swallowed sound and softened sharp edges, turning streets into black mirrors and skyscrapers into ghostly silhouettes. Headlights smeared into streaks of amber and red. Sirens cried somewhere far below, distant and warped, like echoes from another life. On the 42nd floor of Cross Media Group, Daniel Mercer sat alone beneath humming fluorescent lights, staring at numbers that refused to stay still. The spreadsheet on his monitor glowed cold blue, rows and columns blurring together as his eyes burned from exhaustion. He blinked hard, rubbed his face with both hands, and tried to focus. Really focus. But fear had a way of creeping into every quiet moment. 8:49 p.m. He checked the time again, even though he already knew it. He should have been home almost 2 hours ago. He should have been sitting on the edge of his daughter's bed, counting her breaths the way he always did when her chest sounded tight. He should have been telling her that storms were nothing to be afraid of, that rain couldn't hurt them, that Daddy was right there. Instead, he was still here, still working, still pretending that staying late was a choice instead of a necessity. If you've ever stayed somewhere you didn't want to be, because leaving felt more dangerous than staying, this story is for you. And if stories about quiet sacrifices, unexpected connections, and lives changing in a single night or to you, stay with this one. Because everything begins right here. Daniel rolled his shoulders, wincing at the ache that never quite went away anymore. He wasn't ambitious. He wasn't chasing promotions or recognition. He was chasing stability, and even that always seemed just out of reach. The health insurance from Cross Media covered most of Emma's asthma medication. Lose the job, lose the insurance. Lose the insurance, lose control. His phone vibrated softly against the desk. Once, twice. A third time. His stomach dropped. He picked it up. Mrs. Patel, some neighbor dar nefers, her breathing's a little rough again. I gave the inhaler like you said, but she keeps asking when you're coming home, and Daniel closed his eyes. For a moment, the office vanished. The desks, the screens, the endless pressure. All of it disappeared beneath the image of his 6-year-old daughter curled up with her threadbare stuffed fox, trying to be brave because she didn't want to worry him. I'm coming, he whispered. But he didn't move. Not yet. 3 years earlier, his life had split cleanly in two. His wife had left on a Tuesday morning with a suitcase and a half-written note about needing more from life. Adventure. Freedom. Words that sounded noble until you were the one standing in a quiet apartment, holding a crying baby who didn't understand why her mother wasn't coming back. Daniel had learned then that good intentions didn't keep the lights on. Now, he lived carefully. Quietly. One missed paycheck away from everything collapsing. Mercer? You're still here? Daniel flinched. Standing at the edge of his cubicle was Thomas Reed, Senior Strategy Director, already wearing his coat, already halfway out the door. He looked relaxed, untouched by the weight Daniel carried in his chest every day. Just finishing the revisions, Daniel said quickly. Wanted to make sure they were clean for tomorrow. Thomas gave a thin smile. Smart. You know how Evelyn is. The name tightened the air. Evelyn Cross, CEO. Heiress. The woman who turned her late father's faltering media company into a digital empire that devoured competitors whole. She was brilliant, ruthless, and famously untouchable. People didn't talk to Evelyn Cross unless spoken to. People didn't make mistakes around her and live to repeat them. She fired someone from marketing today. Thomas added casually, one typo. Daniel swallowed. Over a typo? Thomas shrugged. Perfection has a price. He checked his phone. Careful heading out. She's still here. He walked away, footsteps echoing toward the elevators. Daniel sat still for a moment longer, then finally shut down his computer. His joints protested as he stood. He slung his worn messenger bag over his shoulder and headed toward the elevators, already rehearsing apologies, already planning how he'd make it up to Emma. As he passed the reception desk, a sharp sound cut through the quiet. Crash. Glass shattering. Daniel stopped. The sound had come from the end of the hallway, from behind the tall, double doors everyone avoided. Evelyn Cross's office. The lights inside were mostly off, except for a single lamp that cast long, crooked shadows across the floor. Daniel should have kept walking. Every instinct told him to mind his business. Then he heard it. A sob. Not loud, not dramatic, just raw. The sound of someone breaking when they thought no one was watching. Daniel hesitated, heart pounding, then walked back and knocked softly. "Ms. Cross." His voice sounded too loud in the stillness. "It's Daniel. From finance." "Go away." The words were slurred, hoarse. Daniel frowned. Are you okay?" No answer. Only uneven breathing. He pushed the door open slightly. The smell hit him first. Expensive alcohol, sharp and overwhelming. A crystal decanter lay shattered on the floor, amber liquid soaking into an ornate rug. Evelyn Cross sat on the floor behind her desk. Her tailored suit was wrinkled. Her dark hair, usually pulled back tight, had come loose, strands clinging to her face. Mascara smudged beneath eyes that were red and unfocused. For the first time Daniel had ever seen her, she didn't look powerful. She looked shattered. "I told you to leave," she whispered, but there was no authority left in her voice. She tried to stand. Her heel slipped. Daniel moved without thinking, catching her elbow before she hit the floor. She jerked away. "Don't touch me. You're going to hurt yourself," he said gently, the same calm voice he used with Emma when she panicked. "You've had too much." Evelyn laughed bitterly. "Too much? I haven't had enough." She squinted at him. "Who are you?" "Daniel Mercer?" "Daniel," she murmured. "You have kind eyes. You shouldn't be here." She gestured weakly around the office. "This place eats people." Daniel looked around. The shattered glass, the empty room, the woman who terrified boardrooms now barely holding herself upright. He couldn't leave her like this. "Where do you live?" he asked quietly. She mumbled an address. "One of the most exclusive towers in Manhattan." "I'm taking you home," Daniel said. "I have a driver." "Not tonight." It took nearly 20 minutes to get her down to the garage without being seen. Rain soaked his jacket as he guided her into his old sedan, the one that smelled faintly of fruit snacks and cheap air freshener. She passed out almost immediately. Daniel sat behind the wheel for a moment, hands shaking slightly. He was driving the most powerful woman in the city through a storm in a car held together by hope and necessity. And he had no idea that this single decision, this one act of decency, had just changed the course of his life forever. As he pulled into traffic, the rain blurred the city into light and shadow. Between the raindrops, something irreversible had already begun. The rain followed them. It chased Daniel Mercer's car out of the underground garage and into the city streets, drumming against the windshield hard enough that the wipers struggled to keep up. Water blurred the world into streaks of light and shadow, Manhattan bending and warping as if the city itself had lost its balance. Evelyn Cross slept in the passenger seat, not the composed, unshakable CEO who commanded rooms with silence and fear, but a woman slumped against the window, her forehead resting against cold glass, breath uneven, lashes dark against pale skin. One hand lay limp in her lap, fingers still faintly smelling of scotch and glass. Daniel kept glancing at her without meaning to. Each time he did, a new wave of disbelief washed over him. This woman signed deals worth more than his lifetime earnings without blinking. She fired people with a sentence. She intimidated investors twice her age. And now she was asleep in his 10-year-old sedan, rain rattling the roof, city noise leaking in through worn seals, utterly defenseless. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "This is insane," he muttered to himself. But he didn't turn around. The address she'd slurred back in the office echoed in his head. An exclusive tower overlooking the river, a place he'd only ever seen in magazines and passing news segments. He'd once walked past it with Emma, her small hand wrapped around his finger, and she'd asked if princesses lived there. At the time, he'd laughed. Now he was driving one home. Traffic was mercifully light. Most of the city had surrendered to the storm, choosing warmth and shelter over wet ambition. Daniel stayed in the right lane, careful, steady, every sense alert. The radio hummed softly, late-night jazz bleeding into static, but he barely heard it. All he could hear was his own heartbeat. Every scenario ran through his mind at once. What if she got sick? What if someone recognized her? What if this cost him his job? What if leaving her alone in that office would have cost her something far worse? He exhaled slowly. He thought of Emma's breathing earlier that night, of the fear that settled into his bones every time her chest tightened, of how helpless he felt then, and how helpless Evelyn Cross had looked on that office floor. Some instincts didn't belong to titles or bank accounts. They belonged to being human. The tower rose out of the rain like something unreal, black glass and steel, its entrance glowing softly under recessed lights. A uniformed doorman straightened as Daniel pulled up, eyes narrowing when he saw the car. Then he saw Evelyn. His posture shifted instantly. "Oh, Miss Cross," the man said, already moving. She's okay," Daniel said quickly, cutting the engine. "She just needs to get inside." The doorman nodded once, professionalism snapping into place. "I'll get the elevator." Together, they helped Evelyn from the car. She stirred slightly, murmured something unintelligible, then went limp again. Daniel's arm slid around her waist instinctively, steadying her as rain soaked into his sleeves. She was lighter than he expected. The lobby was quiet, marble floors gleaming, soft lighting reflecting off pristine surfaces. No warmth, no personality. It felt less like a home and more like a monument to success. The private elevator whisked them upward in silence. Daniel stared at the numbers climbing, acutely aware of how out of place he felt. Wet jacket, scuffed shoes, pulse racing. The doors opened directly into the penthouse. The space was vast. White, gray, glass, stone, cold. Daniel guided Evelyn toward the sofa, easing her down gently. She curled in on herself almost immediately, kicking off her heels with a small, unconscious sound of relief. Her brow furrowed, breath hitching once before settling. Daniel stood there for a moment, unsure what to do with his hands. He looked around. No photos on the walls. No clutter. No signs of life. The kind of place designed to impress, not to comfort. It felt eerily empty, despite its luxury. He found the kitchen, filled a glass with water, set it on the table near her, then hesitated before adding 2 aspirin beside it, a reflex born of long nights caring for someone else. He checked his phone. 2:04 a.m., a knot tightened in his chest. He texted Mrs. Patel quickly. "Emergency ran late. I'm on my way. Thank you for staying. I'll make it up to you." He slipped the phone back into his pocket, glancing at Evelyn again. She stirred. "Don't leave," she whispered, barely audible. Daniel froze. He swallowed. "I can't stay long. Please," she murmured, the word thin and fragile. "Just until I fall asleep. I don't want to be alone." The words didn't sound like a demand. They sounded like fear. Daniel sank into the armchair across from the sofa, exhaustion crashing over him all at once. He kept his eyes on her, counting breaths out of habit, making sure her chest rose and fell evenly. Minutes stretched. The storm outside softened to a steady rhythm, rain tapping against glass like a lullaby. Daniel's thoughts drifted despite himself. Emma's laugh, the weight of responsibility, the strange twist of fate that had landed him here. The woman who had everything had nothing. No warmth. No comfort. No one. Somewhere between one breath and the next, Daniel's eyes closed. Sunlight hit his face like a slap. He jerked awake, heart racing, disoriented for half a second before memory flooded back all at once. The penthouse. The storm. Her. He shot upright, scanning the room. The sofa was empty. Panic flared, sharp and immediate, until a voice cut through it. "You snore." Daniel spun around. Evelyn Cross stood at the kitchen island, a mug of coffee in her hand. She looked different. Clean. Composed. Wrapped in a silk robe, hair damp and loose around her shoulders, face bare of makeup. Younger. Softer. But her eyes were steel again. I'm sorry." Daniel stammered, scrambling to his feet. "I didn't mean to fall asleep. I just wanted to make sure you were safe." She took a slow sip of coffee, watching him over the rim of the mug. "You drove me home," she said flatly. "In that car. It's reliable," Daniel said weakly. "You carried me past the doorman. You didn't take pictures. You didn't call anyone." She set the mug down. "Why?" The question hung between them, heavy and sharp. Daniel met her gaze, exhaustion stripping away any instinct to posture. "Because you were in pain." Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Everyone wants something, she said quietly. What do you want, Daniel Mercer? He grabbed his jacket. I want to go home to my daughter. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was unsettled. Something had shifted, and neither of them could undo it now. Morning didn't arrive gently in the penthouse. It crept in slowly, deliberately, sliding through floor to ceiling windows in pale ribbons of gold and silver, illuminating every sharp edge and polished surface Evelyn Cross had chosen precisely because they didn't invite comfort. The city beyond the glass looked freshly washed, rainwater glistening on rooftops and streets like a second skin. Manhattan was awake again, unforgiving, impatient, alive. Daniel Mercer stood near the kitchen island, jacket in hand, every instinct telling him he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Evelyn watched him over the rim of her coffee mug. In the full clarity of morning, she was stunning in a way that had nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with presence. The silk robe she wore was loosely tied at the waist, skimming her curves instead of hiding them, the fabric catching the light as she leaned against the marble counter. Her posture was relaxed but controlled, spine straight, shoulders back, confidence returning to her body even if the night before still lingered in her eyes. She wasn't hungover. She was calculating. You fell asleep, she said calmly. Daniel cleared his throat. I didn't mean to. You stayed, she corrected. Yes. Why? The question wasn't accusatory. It was surgical. Daniel hesitated, then answered honestly. I didn't want to risk you choking, or falling, or being found by the wrong person. Evelyn set the mug down with a soft click. She circled the island slowly, heels bare against the stone floor, every step measured. Daniel became acutely aware of the space between them shrinking. You know what would have happened if someone had found me like that, she said. A photo, a leak, a headline. The board would have eaten me alive before noon. I know. And yet, she said softly, stopping 3 feet from him. You didn't take advantage. Daniel met her gaze. I didn't help you for leverage. Silence stretched. The hum of the refrigerator sounded unnaturally loud. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, studying him the way she studied hostile takeovers and unbalanced ledgers. A picture of me on that office floor would have been worth at least $50,000. More if you sold it quietly. Daniel blinked. I didn't even think about it. That's what concerns me, she said. He frowned. Concerns you? Yes. Her lips curved faintly. Not a smile, not quite. Everyone thinks about it. Daniel exhaled, exhaustion finally bleeding through his shark. Not everyone is a shark. Her eyes darkened at that. You work here, she said. You know better than to believe that. He slipped his jacket over his arm. With respect, Miss Cross, I need to go. My daughter's waiting for me. The word daughter landed harder than he expected. Evelyn stiffened. Daughter? She repeated. Yes. How old? 6. Another silence, this one different, sharper. Evelyn turned away, pacing a few steps before stopping at the window. The city reflected faintly in the glass, overlaying her image with steel and sky. I looked at your file, she said. Daniel froze. My file. Human Resources keeps meticulous records, she said evenly. I had time this morning. Kahit crept up his neck. That's inappropriate. So is driving your CEO home in a car that smells like fruit snacks, she countered without turning around. He didn't argue. I know you're a single father, she continued. I know your wife left 3 years ago. I know your daughter has asthma. I know you're $42,000 in medical debt. And I know you're 2 months behind on rent. Daniel felt like the floor had tilted beneath him. You had no right. I had every right. She snapped, turning sharply. You were unconscious in my home. You are now a liability. That word hurt more than it should have. I wasn't trying to be, he said quietly. I believe you, she replied, and that was worse. She walked closer again, stopping directly in front of him. Up close, Daniel could see the faint shadows beneath her eyes, the tension she carried even when standing still. Power clung to her like a second skin, but so did loneliness. You're drowning, Daniel Mercer, she said, and you're too proud to admit it. He laughed once bitter. I don't have the luxury of pride. Evelyn studied his face, searching for something. Then she inhaled slowly, as if bracing herself. I have a problem, she said. Daniel waited. My father's will contains a clause. She continued. An archaic one. It requires that by my 33rd birthday, 2 months from now, I demonstrate stability, family values, domestic grounding. Daniel frowned. That sounds vague. It's deliberate, she said. The board is using it to question my leadership, my temperament, my fitness. And they think, what? Daniel asked carefully. That you're unstable. They think I'm alone, she corrected. And alone, in their minds, is dangerous. She stepped back, giving them both space. I need a fiancé. The words landed like a dropped glass. Daniel stared at her. Excuse me. A contract marriage, she clarified briskly. 1 year, public engagement, a wedding, appearances, then a quiet separation. He shook his head slowly. You're joking. I don't joke. You don't even know me. I know enough, she said, reaching for a folder on the counter. You're competent, non-threatening, a devoted father. You look like stability. He stared at the folder. Didn't open it. What happens to my daughter? He asked. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She benefits. She slid a check across the marble. Daniel glanced down despite himself. $500,000. That's the signing bonus, Evelyn said. I'll eliminate your medical debt, cover specialists, secure housing, college fund. His hands trembled. And if I say no, he asked quietly. Her expression hardened. Then you walk out. You keep your job, for now, and you hope the next round of cost-cutting doesn't land on your desk. The room felt smaller. Daniel thought of Emma's cough, of eviction notices hidden in drawers, of nights spent choosing which bill to delay. What's the catch? He asked. You live with me, Evelyn said. You sell the story, and you promise me one thing. What? That you never fall in love with me. The words echoed. Between them stood money, power, fear, and something far more dangerous. Hope. Daniel didn't answer. Not yet, because some decisions change lives, and some destroy them. This one would do both. Daniel didn't touch the check. It lay on the marble counter between them, stark and unreal, its crisp edges catching the morning light as if it were something alive, something watching him. $500,000. A number so large it stopped being money and turned into abstraction, like the distance between stars or the depth of the ocean. He could stare at it forever and still not fully understand what it meant. Evelyn Cross watched his hands. She noticed the way his fingers curled slightly, then loosened again, the way his jaw tightened, not with greed, but with restraint. That detail mattered more to her than she would ever admit. You don't have to decide this second, she said, her voice measured. But time is not on my side. Daniel finally looked up at her. In the clean, unforgiving daylight, she was every bit the woman people feared. Tall, poised, devastatingly elegant even in a robe that skimmed her figure and hinted at curves she neither flaunted nor hid. Her confidence had returned like armor snapping back into place, yet something fragile still flickered beneath the surface, visible only if you were looking for it. I'm not for sale, he said. Evelyn didn't flinch. Everyone is. The only difference is price. That's not true, Daniel replied quietly. She studied him for a long moment. It is in my world. He picked up the check, felt the weight of it between his fingers, then set it back down exactly where it had been. You're asking me to lie. To my daughter. To everyone. I'm asking you to perform, Evelyn corrected. People do it every day. This isn't a presentation, he said. This is a child's life. Her eyes sharpened. Exactly. Silence stretched again, thicker this time. Daniel walked toward the window, staring out at the city far below. From up here, Manhattan looked orderly, manageable, lines and grids and patterns that made sense. It didn't show the cramped apartments, the overdue notices, the nights spent listening for wheezes in the dark. You said the board thinks you're unstable, he said. Why me? Evelyn joined him at the glass close enough that he could feel the faint warmth of her body. Because you're ordinary. He turned, surprised. That's not exactly flattering. It's perfect, she said. You're not flashy. You don't belong to my world. You look like someone who came from effort instead of inheritance. You look safe. The word hit harder than any insult. I don't feel safe, Daniel said. I know, she replied. That's why this works. He shook his head slowly. You don't even know if I'd be good at this. Evelyn's lips curved faintly. You carried me through a lobby without making it a spectacle. You stayed when you could have left. You didn't exploit my weakness. You're already better at this than half the men who've tried to orbit me. He laughed once, humorless. Orbit. They don't see me, she said. They see access. Daniel turned fully toward her now. And what do you see? She hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But he caught it. I see a man with nothing left to lose, she said finally, and everything to protect. The word settled between them like a verdict. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, dread curling in his stomach. Mrs. Patella, she's still asleep. Breathing's easier now. I'll wait until you get here. Relief washed through him so hard his knees almost gave. Evelyn noticed. She's okay. For now, he said. That can change in a heartbeat. Evelyn nodded once. Which is why you should say yes. He turned away from the window, pacing now, hands dragging through his hair. This isn't just about money. If this comes out, if anyone finds out it's fake. Won't, Evelyn said sharply. There will be contracts, NDAs, layers of insulation. And what about feelings? He shot back. You can't contract those away. Her expression cooled. You won't have them. That's not how people work. That's how I work. Daniel stopped pacing and faced her again. Why are you really doing this? Her gaze didn't waver. I told you. No. He said softly. You told me the board's reason? I'm asking for yours. For a long moment, Evelyn said nothing. Then she exhaled, slow and controlled, as if allowing herself one dangerous truth. My father built this company, she said. He believed love made people weak. He believed power was safety. I believed him, for a long time. And now the same men who praised me for being ruthless are calling me unfit because I don't have a family to soften their fears. She laughed quietly, bitter. They don't want stability. They want control. Daniel listened. I won't lose this company, she continued. And I won't let them dismantle my life because it doesn't look the way they prefer. So you'll manufacture one? Daniel said. Yes. He thought of Emma's drawings taped to the fridge, of bedtime stories, of promises he'd made that he was already struggling to keep. You said 1 year? He said. Minimum, Evelyn replied. Long enough to satisfy the clause. After that, we separate quietly. And in that year, he said, I pretend to love you. You pretend to be devoted, she corrected. Love is not required. Daniel looked at her then, really looked. At the woman who had everything and nothing at the same time. At the way she stood so straight it looked painful. At the loneliness she wore like a tailored suit. And if I can't pretend? He asked. Evelyn's voice dropped. Then you shouldn't say yes. The honesty of it startled him. He picked up the check again, then folded it once, twice. He didn't tear it. Not yet. I need to talk to my daughter, he said. Evelyn nodded immediately. Of course. I need to think, he added. Take the day, she said. I'll have legal draft preliminary documents, no pressure. He almost laughed at that. Daniel grabbed his jacket and bag, heading for the door. His hand hovered over the handle, then stilled. If I say yes, he said without turning around, this doesn't just save you. Evelyn's voice was quiet behind him. I know. It changes her life, he finished. So does poverty, Evelyn said. He opened the door. The hallway outside felt different now, like the world before a storm breaks, charged and uncertain. Daniel Mercer walked out of the penthouse with $500,000 in his pocket and a decision that would haunt him no matter what he chose. Behind him, Evelyn Cross stood alone in a room that had never felt larger, and for the first time in years, she was afraid not of losing power, but of wanting something real. Daniel Mercer didn't go home right away. He drove past his apartment, past the corner store where the cashier knew Emma by name, past the park where he used to push her on the swings on weekends when her lungs were strong enough and his mind wasn't drowning in numbers. The city slid by in a blur of concrete and color as he gripped the steering wheel, the folded check heavy in his jacket pocket like a foreign object he didn't know how to remove. $500,000. It felt obscene. Unreal, like a mistake the universe would eventually correct by taking something else in return. He pulled over beneath an overpass, rainwater dripping steadily from rusted steel beams, and finally allowed himself to breathe. Long, slow breaths that shook his chest. He rested his forehead against the steering wheel, eyes closed, and let the question he'd been avoiding surface fully. What kind of father accepts money to lie? Emma's face rose in his mind immediately. Her crooked smile, the way she tilted her head when she asked difficult questions, the absolute trust in her eyes when she believed him. He had built their life on truth, because it was the only currency he had left. But truth didn't pay hospital bills. Daniel straightened and reached for his phone. He didn't call Evelyn. He called home. Mrs. Patel answered on the second ring. "Daniel, how is she?" His voice cracked despite his effort to steady it. "She's sleeping. Breathing is calm. I put the humidifier on like you showed me." "Thank you," he said, closing his eyes. "Thank you for staying. She needs you." Mrs. Patel said gently. "So do I." He replied, and meant it more than he could explain. He ended the call and sat in silence, listening to the rain. Then he imagined the alternative. Eviction notices. Cheaper medication that didn't work as well. Emergency rooms where he had to argue with insurance representatives while Emma wheezed in his arms. Courts where lawyers with polished smiles questioned his stability and income and quietly suggested that maybe a different arrangement would be better for the child. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the check. The numbers didn't blur this time. They stared back at him, precise and devastating. "This isn't charity," Evelyn had said. No, it was a transaction. Daniel hated that part most, that she was right. He folded the check again and put it back. The decision didn't feel like surrender. It felt like sacrifice. Evelyn Cross spent the afternoon in controlled chaos. Her legal team arrived in waves, sharp suits, sharper minds, filling the penthouse with clipped voices and tablets full of contingencies. She sat at the head of the dining table, posture immaculate, legs crossed, robe replaced with a fitted dress that hugged her waist and fell just above her knees. The cut was elegant, subtly revealing, the kind of outfit that reminded everyone in the room who she was without a word spoken. But her thoughts weren't on contracts. They were on a man with tired eyes and too much integrity. "He hasn't called," her chief counsel said quietly, sliding a document toward her. "We can delay drafting if." "No," Evelyn said. "Prepare everything." "Yes, Miss Cross." She nodded once, dismissing him. The room cleared slowly. When the last door closed, silence rushed back in, louder than before. Evelyn rose and walked to the window, resting one hand against the cool glass. Her reflection stared back, powerful, composed, flawless, and afraid. She didn't fear losing the company. She feared that Daniel would say no, that he would walk away with his pride intact and leave her alone with a victory that tasted like ash. 2-2 Daniel returned home just after sunset. Emma was awake, sitting on the couch wrapped in a blanket, cheeks flushed but eyes bright when she saw him. "Daddy!" she called, scrambling up. He crossed the room in 2 steps and lifted her carefully into his arms, holding her close, breathing in the familiar scent of soap and medicine and home. "Hey, Bug," he murmured. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she said proudly. "Mrs. Patel says I was very brave." "You always are." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You were late." "I know," he said softly. "I'm sorry. Did work need you again?" He hesitated. "Just for a second." "Yes," he said. "But things might change." She pulled back to look at him, brow furrowing. "Change how?" Daniel swallowed. "We might move for a little while. Like a trip." "Sort of." "Will you still read to me?" Every part of him broke open at that question. Every night, he promised. No matter what. She smiled satisfied and rested her head against his chest again. That was it. That was the moment the decision locked into place. Later that night, after Emma fell asleep, Daniel stood in the dim kitchen staring at the peeling paint on the cabinets and the stack of unopened mail on the counter. He pulled out his phone. He typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, he hit send. I'll do it. But we do this clean, and my daughter comes first. The response came less than a minute later. I agreed. Welcome aboard, Daniel. He stared at the screen, pulse racing, the weight of the future settling heavily on his shoulders. The penthouse looked different when Daniel returned the next morning. Not warmer. Not yet, but altered, like a space waiting to be inhabited rather than displayed. Evelyn stood near the window when he arrived, dressed impeccably in a tailored ensemble that emphasized her curves without excess, heels grounding her posture in confidence. She turned when she heard him, her expression unreadable. You came, she said. I said I would, Daniel replied. A faint smile touched her lips before she smoothed it away. The contracts are ready. He nodded. Before that, there are rules. Her brow arched. Already negotiating? Yes. She gestured for him to continue. My daughter's needs come first, he said. Always. No exceptions. She doesn't become a prop. She doesn't get used to sell an image. Evelyn didn't hesitate. Agreed. No surprises. He added. No secrets that could blow back on her. Reasonable. And if at any point this stops being safe for her, Daniel finished. I'm out. Evelyn met his gaze steadily. So am I. Something passed between them then. Not attraction, not trust, but recognition. Two people stepping into a fire for different reasons. Bound by the same line they refused to cross. She extended her hand. Daniel took it. The deal was sealed not with ink, but with a quiet understanding that neither of them would walk away unchanged. The move happened faster than Daniel expected, not because Evelyn rushed him, but because momentum, once invited in, had a way of erasing hesitation. By noon, lawyers had finalized timelines. By evening, a moving service arrived at Daniel's apartment with boxes and non-disclosure agreements. By nightfall, the life he had built out of necessity was packed into cardboard and labeled with black marker. Emma watched from the couch, legs tucked beneath her, eyes wide as strangers wrapped their world in bubble wrap. Are we moving forever? She asked quietly. Daniel knelt in front of her, careful to keep his voice steady. Just for a while. Somewhere safer. Like with more space. Less. And better air. She tapped her chest unconsciously. Yes, he said, and smiled. Much better. That was enough for her. Children were pragmatic like that. They understood outcomes better than explanations. The drive back to the penthouse was silent except for Emma's soft humming and the city noise outside. Daniel's car felt smaller now, crowded with boxes and the weight of a promise he had already started to keep. When the tower rose into view, Emma pressed her face to the window. It's really tall, she whispered. Yes, Daniel said. It is. The doorman greeted them by name this time. The elevator ride was quiet, smooth, unreal. When the doors opened, the penthouse swallowed them whole. Emma stepped inside first. Her sneakers squeaked softly against marble. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the height, the echo of her own movement. Daddy, she said, voice hushed with awe. Is this a museum? Daniel smiled despite himself. Something like that. Evelyn stood near the window, arms crossed, not defensively, but uncertainly. She had changed since the morning, a fitted blouse tucked into high, waisted trousers that emphasized her silhouette and authority without effort, heels grounding her posture. Confident, imposing, and very, very out of her element. This was the first time she'd seen a child in her space. Emma noticed her instantly. She tilted her head, studying Evelyn with open curiosity. Are you the lady from Daddy's phone? Daniel froze. Evelyn blinked. The lady. She heard you coughing. Emma explained helpfully. Daddy said you were sick. Daniel opened his mouth to correct her. Evelyn beat him to it. I was, she said. Her voice was calm, controlled. But I'm better now. Emma nodded solemnly, satisfied. Good. You should drink water when you cough. I'll remember that, Evelyn said. A strange silence followed. Emma extended her hand. I'm Emma. Evelyn stared at the small hand like it might explode. Daniel held his breath. Then Evelyn Cross, CEO, Billionaire, terror of boardrooms, reached out and shook it gently. I'm Evelyn, she said. Welcome, Emma smiled. You have a big house. Yes? Evelyn replied. It's excessive. Emma giggled. The sound hit Evelyn like a shockwave. Something in her posture softened. Just a fraction. Daniel exhaled. Evelyn gestured down the hall. Your room is there. Second door on the left. It's been prepared. Emma's eyes widened. For me? Yes. Can I see it? Daniel nodded. Go, and Emma took off running. Careful. Daniel called. But she was already gone, laughter echoing down the pristine hallway. Evelyn winced at the sound, not in irritation, but in something like disbelief. She's loud, Daniel said apologetically. Evelyn watched the hallway where Emma had disappeared. She's alive. That night, the penthouse changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but irreversibly. A pair of small shoes appeared by the door, bright and scuffed and completely out of place beside Evelyn's immaculate heels. A stuffed fox was on the sofa with deliberate care. A child's drawing, crooked and colorful, ended up taped to the refrigerator before anyone could stop it. Evelyn noticed. She didn't say anything. Dinner was awkward. They ate takeout on the long dining table, the contrast absurd. Cardboard boxes and chopsticks on polished stone. Emma talked. Daniel listened. Evelyn observed. Do you work a lot? Emma asked suddenly. Yes, Evelyn answered. Too much. Evelyn paused. Probably. Emma nodded, satisfied. Daddy works too much sometimes. Daniel winced. Evelyn met his eyes across the table. Something passed between them, acknowledgement without accusation. Later, after Emma was tucked into bed in a room too big and too pink and far too quiet, Daniel stood in the doorway watching her fall asleep. The air purifier hummed softly, steady and reassuring. When he turned, Evelyn was there. She's settled, he said. I noticed. Evelyn replied. She adapts quickly. She has to. They stood in silence. You don't have to worry, Evelyn said eventually. About space, or noise, or disruption? Daniel studied her face. You don't sound convinced. She exhaled slowly. I've structured my life to avoid unpredictability. And now, she said, there's a child in my hallway. Daniel smiled faintly. She tends to do that. Evelyn hesitated. I don't know what to do with children, with this. She gestured vaguely. A family-shaped thing. Daniel considered her. The power, the fear, the sincerity buried beneath both. You don't have to know, he said. You just have to not disappear. She nodded once. That night, after the lights dimmed and the city hummed below, Evelyn stood alone in the living room and realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, her home didn't feel empty. It terrified her, and she wasn't sure she wanted it to stop. The world didn't wait for them to adjust. By Monday morning, the rumors had already started. Daniel felt them before he heard them. The subtle shift in the air when he walked into Cross Media Group, the way conversations stalled half a second too long, the glances that lingered before snapping away. Sterling glass and steel reflected his image back at him in fragments, the same man, the same suit, but standing straighter than before, as if the ground beneath his feet had changed. Evelyn had warned him. The story has to land before the speculation does. She'd said over coffee the night before. We don't chase narratives. We set them. Now, in the private elevator rising toward the executive floor, Daniel adjusted his tie for the third time and wondered how anyone ever learned to perform confidence without cracking under it. Relax. Evelyn stood beside him, immaculate in a fitted ivory blazer and tailored skirt that traced her waist and hips with deliberate precision. The outfit was elegant, restrained, unmistakably powerful, and subtly disarming. Her posture was flawless, chin lifted, shoulders squared. The woman who ruled this building had returned in full. They already expect you to belong, she continued. All you have to do is not contradict them. Daniel let out a slow breath. That's easy for you to say. Her lips curved faintly. It's easier for you than you think. The elevator doors opened. The floor fell silent. Every head turned. Evelyn didn't slow. She didn't acknowledge the attention. She simply walked forward, heels striking marble with measured authority. Daniel matched her pace instinctively, his presence aligning with hers, not trailing, not leading, standing beside. They reached the conference room where senior leadership waited. "This is Daniel Mercer," Evelyn said smoothly, one hand resting lightly at his forearm. The touch was brief but intentional. "My fiancée." The word rippled through the room. Daniel felt it in his bones. He nodded once. "Good morning." For a moment, no one spoke. Then hands extended, smiles appeared, compliments flowed. "So this is the mystery man. You kept him hidden. Well done, Evelyn." Daniel answered when spoken to, kept his responses simple, grounded. He didn't posture. He didn't perform charm. He listened, smiled when appropriate, asked thoughtful questions when invited. The skills he used with his daughter, attention, patience, presence, translated better than he'd expected. Evelyn watched him from the corner of her eye. This part wasn't scripted. After the meeting, she pulled him aside into her office. The glass walls offered privacy without illusion. "You did well," she said. He loosened his tie. "I didn't say much." "Exactly." She moved closer, adjusting his lapel with practiced fingers. The contact was professional, rehearsed, but her hand lingered half a second longer than necessary. "For the cameras?" she murmured. Daniel nodded, but neither of them stepped back immediately. They broke apart as her assistant appeared with a tablet. "The press has taken the bait," the assistant said. "They want a statement. Photos." Evelyn nodded. "Schedule something controlled. Tonight." Fright. The training began that afternoon. A media consultant coached posture. A stylist refined Daniel's wardrobe. A publicist shaped sound bites and origin stories. "We met in an elevator," Evelyn said without hesitation. Daniel frowned. "The truth. A version of it," she replied. "Stuck for 2 hours. Forced conversation. Mutual discovery." He considered that. "I hate the color yellow." She blinked. "Why?" "It reminds me of hospitals." She nodded. "Then I hate yellow too." They practiced walking together, standing together, smiling at the same moment. Evelyn taught him how to read a room the way she did, where power shifted, who mattered, who pretended not to. Daniel taught her something too, how to listen without waiting to speak. He said quietly after she interrupted him for the third time. She bristled, then stopped. "Do that again," she said. By evening, they were exhausted. The penthouse lights dimmed as the city lit up below. Evelyn loosened her hair, the tension bleeding from her shoulders as she leaned against the counter, blazer discarded. The blouse beneath skimmed her form, softening her silhouette without diminishing it. Daniel watched her without thinking. She noticed. "You're staring," she said. "You're different," he replied, careful. She warned lightly. "That's not in the contract." He looked away. "Just observing?" She crossed the room and handed him a glass of water. "You're learning quickly." "So are you." Her brow lifted. "About what?" "About letting someone stand next to you." For a moment, the performance fell away, just two people in borrowed roles learning the weight of them. "Tomorrow," Evelyn said quietly, "we become public." Daniel nodded. Outside, the city pressed on, unaware that something fragile and dangerous was taking shape behind the glass. A story was being written, and once told, it couldn't be taken back. The gala arrived like a threat wrapped in velvet. By the time the black car pulled up beneath the chandeliers of the Grant Meridian Hotel, Manhattan had already decided what the night would be about. Power, optics, and the quiet violence of being seen. Camera flashes ignited the rain's slick pavement, freezing moments into currency. Voices called names. Laughter spilled out too loudly. Everyone there understood the rules. This was where reputations were sharpened or blotted out. Daniel felt at the instant the door opened. Evelyn stepped out first. She wore emerald silk that clung and flowed at once, a gown cut to honor her authority as much as her femininity. Cinched at the waist, fabric skimming her hips, a tasteful slit revealing movement without surrender. The neckline was restrained, elegant, undeniably alluring. Her posture was flawless, shoulders back, chin lifted. The effect was immediate and absolute. The city leaned in. Daniel followed, offering his arm without being told. The gesture was small, practiced, and essential. Evelyn took it, her fingers warm against his sleeve, her grip tighter than necessary. "Breathe," he murmured, barely moving his lips. "I am breathing," she replied softly. He felt the tremor anyway. They stepped forward together. The crowd shifted, a ripple of recognition spreading outward as whispers stacked on whispers. Phones tilted, cameras snapped. The story they had rehearsed now lived on the tongues of strangers. Inside, the ballroom glowed, gold light, polished floors, bodies moving in choreographed clusters. Power dressed itself here and pretended it was art. Daniel stayed present. He listened. He smiled. He made space for others without diminishing Evelyn. When asked how they met, he delivered the elevator story with warmth and restraint, just enough imperfection to sound real. When asked about the wedding, Evelyn deflected with practiced mystery. They moved like a unit. Then Gavin Holt appeared. He slid into their orbit with the confidence of a man who believed rooms belonged to him by default. Tailored suit, predatory smile, champagne flute held like a weapon. His eyes flicked to Daniel, then back to Evelyn, lingering with calculation. "So the rumors were true," Gavin said lightly. "Congratulations." "Thank you," Evelyn replied coolly. Gavin's smile sharpened. "I'll admit, I'm surprised. You've always had higher standards." The circle around them tightened, curious, expectant. Daniel felt Evelyn's hand tense on his arm. He stepped forward half a pace. "And I'm surprised," Daniel said pleasantly, "that someone in your position would mistake status for substance." A few quiet chuckles escaped the edges of the group. Gavin's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. Evelyn doesn't choose people based on convenience." Daniel continued, unruffled. "She chooses character. It's why she didn't choose you." The silence that followed was surgical. Ellen turned to Daniel, shock flashing across her face, then something else. Respect. Relief. Gavin laughed too loudly. "Enjoy the night," he said, already retreating. "We'll talk soon. Looking forward to it." Evelyn replied, her voice steady again. They didn't speak until they reached the balcony. City lights sprawled below them, infinite and indifferent. The night air was cool, heavy with the promise of rain. "You didn't have to do that," Evelyn said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "I did." She turned toward him. The mask slipped. "Not entirely, but enough. You humiliated him. He tried to humiliate you." "A beat. Thank you," she said quietly. The word lingered. A photographer shifted behind the glass doors. Evelyn glanced over Daniel's shoulder. "We need to make it convincing." He nodded. "For the cameras." She stepped closer. Her hand rose. Slow, deliberate, and cupped his jaw. The touch was electric, grounding, terrifying. Daniel inhaled sharply, every instinct firing at once. She kissed him. Not carefully. Not gently. The kiss was hungry, desperate, unplanned. The kiss of a woman who had spent years denying herself softness and found it suddenly within reach. Daniel's hands came to her waist without permission, pulling her closer, feeling the truth of her there. For one suspended moment, the contract vanished. When they broke apart, the city seemed louder. Evelyn's breath was unsteady. That, she whispered, touching her lips, was not in the agreement. Daniel's voice was rough. "No." They stared at each other, the danger now fully visible. Inside, applause rose for someone else's victory. Outside, something irrevocable had just begun. They did not talk about the kiss. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when the city woke beneath their windows and the penthouse filled with soft daylight that felt too honest for what had happened on that balcony. The silence around it became a third presence in the room. Unspoken, heavy, impossible to ignore. Daniel stood at the kitchen counter, pouring cereal for Emma, his movements careful and deliberate. He focused on the mundane because the alternative. Thinking about the way Evelyn's hand had felt at his jaw, the urgency in her mouth, was not something he could afford. Evelyn watched from a distance. She wore a fitted morning dress, tailored but deceptively soft, the fabric tracing her waist and hips without effort. Her hair was down, still slightly damp, a controlled looseness that suggested intimacy without offering it. She held a mug of coffee she hadn't touched. "Did you sleep?" Daniel asked without looking at her. "Yes," she replied. It was a lie. They both knew it. Emma padded into the kitchen in socks that didn't quite match, her stuffed fox tucked under one arm. "Good morning," she announced brightly. Evelyn straightened instantly. "Good morning." Emma studied her with the frank curiosity of a child. "You look fancy." Evelyn blinked. "I do." "Yes," Emma said, "like when Daddy puts on his serious face." Daniel smiled despite himself. Evelyn's lips curved, small, genuine, gone too quickly. "Is that a good thing?" Emma considered this carefully. "It means you're trying." The words landed with unexpected weight. Breakfast passed quietly. Daniel walked Emma to the private car arranged for school, crouching to her level before she climbed in. "I'll see you later," he said. "Promise." "Promise." She waved through the window until the car disappeared. When Daniel returned upstairs, the penthouse felt too large again. Evelyn stood by the window, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the city. "We should set boundaries," she said without turning. He nodded, agreed. "What happened last night?" she continued, voice steady but brittle, "was situational. By stress." Daniel offered. "Performance bleed," she said. He paused. "That's not a real thing." "It is now." She turned to face him. The confidence was back, the posture, the control, but something vulnerable flickered beneath it. "We don't repeat it," she said. "No," Daniel agreed. They stood there, aligned in denial. The day moved forward anyway. Meetings, calls, messages from publicists and planners. Evelyn navigated them with ruthless efficiency, slipping seamlessly back into the role she'd perfected. Daniel watched her work, noting the ease with which she commanded attention, the way rooms bent around her will. But now he also noticed the cost. The tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw clenched when she thought no one was watching. The brief moments when her gaze drifted toward the hallway where Emma's laughter sometimes echoed. That evening, the penthouse was quieter than usual. Rain returned, gentle this time, streaking the windows like memory. Daniel found Evelyn in the living room, seated on the sofa, shoes kicked off, laptop open but untouched. "You didn't eat," he said. She glanced up. "I forgot." He disappeared in the kitchen and returned with a plate. Simple food, nothing elegant. He set it down beside her without comment. She stared at it, then at him. "You don't have to do that." "I know." She ate anyway. The city lights reflected in the glass behind her, outlining her silhouette, confident, feminine, controlled, and tired. "This won't last," she said suddenly. He sat across from her. "What won't?" "This balance. The board, the press, the image." She met his eyes. "You." Daniel didn't flinch. "It lasts as long as it needs to." "That's not how this ends," she said quietly. "People like me don't get this kind of ending." "People like you," he replied, "decide how things end." She laughed softly, without humor. "You're dangerously optimistic." "I have to be," he said. "My daughter's watching." The words hung between them. Evelyn looked away first. Later that night, long after the penthouse lights dimmed, Evelyn stood alone in her bedroom, staring at her reflection. She touched her lips, memory sparking like a live wire. She had built her life on control, on never needing, on never wanting what she couldn't command. And yet, across the hall, Daniel lay awake too, staring at the ceiling, replaying the same moment from the opposite side. He thought of promises, of lines drawn and already blurred. Between them stretched a corridor filled with quiet risk, and neither of them slept. Because the kiss hadn't been a mistake. It had been a warning. The penthouse learned their rhythms before they did. It happened quietly, without ceremony. Mornings found Daniel in the kitchen before sunrise, coffee brewing softly while the city yawned awake beyond the glass. Evenings ended with lights dimmed earlier than Evelyn had ever allowed, the silence no longer sharp but thoughtful, almost cautious. The space didn't warm so much as it softened, edges rounded by repetition, by presence, by the simple act of sharing air. They became efficient together. Too efficient. Daniel learned where Evelyn kept her patience and where she ran out of it. He noticed the way she read emails twice before sending them when she was tired, how she stood straighter when challenged, how her voice never rose, but sometimes thinned like a wire pulled too tight. Evelyn, in turn, learned Daniel's tells. The way he rubbed the bridge of his nose when overwhelmed, the stillness that settled into him when he was worried about Emma, the calm he carried like a shield. It felt like a partnership, which made it dangerous. The first crack came on a Thursday. Evelyn arrived home late, heels clicking sharply against marble. Her fitted sheath dress immaculate but her shoulders drawn in, tension wound tight beneath elegance. She dropped her bag on the console table harder than intended. Daniel looked up from the couch. Long day. She exhaled. The board wants more proof. Not numbers. Optics. Off what? Off us? She said. He waited. They want visibility. Evelyn continued. Domestic stability. Something tangible. Daniel frowned. We've been careful. Careful doesn't sell, she replied. The implication settled between them. I won't put Emma on display. Daniel said immediately. Evelyn's gaze sharpened. I wouldn't ask that. But they will, he countered. Yes, she admitted. Eventually, silence followed. Daniel stood, walking toward the window, city lights reflecting off the glass. Then we need limits. Evelyn joined him, standing close but not touching. Her presence was undeniable. Confident, feminine, controlled. Limits make people suspicious. So does exploitation, he said. She looked at him then, really looked, and something shifted. You're right, she said quietly. We'll set the terms. The next night, they hosted a dinner. Not a gala, not a spectacle, a small curated gathering. 2 board members, 1 influential investor, and a journalist known for subtlety. The penthouse was staged to feel lived in but restrained. Flowers softened corners. Music hummed low. Evelyn wore a fitted evening dress that balanced authority with allure, posture immaculate, smile measured. Daniel stood at her side, grounded, present, unshowy. They played their parts. Daniel listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions, redirected attention with ease. He talked about community programs, about mentorship, about values without preaching them. Evelyn watched the room tilt toward him and felt something unexpected. Relief. This worked. After the guests left, applause replaced by silence, Evelyn poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. You were good, she said. You were honest, he replied. That's riskier, she said, then paused. Thank you. He nodded. The rain began again later that night, light and persistent. Daniel found Evelyn on the balcony, city wind tugging at her hair. She wore a silk wrap that clung to her shoulders, the fabric tracing form as she leaned on the railing. You're thinking? He said. I'm recalculating, she corrected. About what? She didn't answer immediately. I've spent my life believing control equals safety. And now I'm not sure, she said. Because I feel safer when I don't control everything. Daniel rested his forearms on the railing beside her, close enough to share warmth, far enough to respect the line they'd drawn. Safety isn't control, it's trust. She laughed softly. You make it sound simple. It isn't, he said, but it's worth trying. She turned toward him, city lights painting her profile in gold and shadow. For a moment, the contract felt like a thin piece of paper fluttering between them. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. You don't have to know, he replied. You just have to show up. The rain fell harder. Neither of them moved. And somewhere between the quiet and the storm, the performance began to feel like something else entirely. The past didn't knock. It stormed in. It happened on a Tuesday, because of course it did, when the day had already been stretched thin by meetings, optics, and the kind of quiet pressure that left no visible bruises. Evelyn was mid-brief with legal when her assistant's voice cracked through the intercom. Miss Cross, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman in the lobby. Evelyn frowned. Security. They tried. She won't leave. A pause. She says she's Daniel's wife. The room went cold. Evelyn stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. Meeting adjourned. She didn't wait for questions. The elevator ride down felt longer than physics allowed. Every second stretched, filled with calculations she didn't want to make. Exposure, narrative collapse, collateral damage, and underneath it all, fear for a 6-year-old who had finally started sleeping through the night. The lobby was chaos wrapped in marble. A woman stood at the center of it, blonde hair disheveled, eyes bright with a restless, hungry energy. Her coat was expensive but worn, like it had once belonged to a better version of her life. Security hovered uncertainly, unwilling to escalate. "I know he's here," the woman shouted. "I want to see my husband, Daniel." Evelyn stepped forward. The temperature dropped. "Let her go," Evelyn said calmly. The guards obeyed instantly. The woman turned, eyes flicking over Evelyn with sharp appraisal. "And you must be the rich one." Evelyn didn't blink. "You are." The woman smiled thinly. "Laura Mercer. Daniel's wife? Ex-wife?" Daniel's voice cut in. He emerged from the corridor, face pale, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The sight of him seemed to fuel Laura rather than stop her. "There you are," she said brightly. "Living the dream, I hear." Daniel stepped in front of Evelyn without thinking. "What are you doing here?" "I came for my daughter," Laura replied. "I heard you upgraded." Evelyn felt something sharp and protective ignite in her chest. "You left," Daniel said. "You don't get to come back like this." Laura laughed. "Courts don't care about feelings. They care about stability." And suddenly, her gaze slid to Evelyn. "You have it." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "That's enough," she said coolly. "This is not the place." Laura's eyes gleamed. "Oh, it's exactly the place." She tossed a business card at Daniel's feet. "My lawyer will be in touch." Then she turned and walked out, heels clicking triumphantly against marble. The silence she left behind was deafening. Daniel sagged slightly. "She's going to try to take her," he whispered. Evelyn placed a steadying hand at his back. "No, she won't." The penthouse that night became a war room. Legal documents spread across the dining table. Custody agreements. Old filings. Decisions made under pressure years ago resurfaced like landmines. "I didn't have the money to fight her," Daniel admitted, shame heavy in his voice. "I signed what I could just to keep her away." Evelyn paced, controlled fury coiling beneath her calm. "She doesn't want Emma. She wants leverage. And if she digs," Daniel said quietly, "she finds us. The contract. The money. The performance. If exposed, everything unraveled. Emma's stability, Evelyn's leadership, the fragile world they'd built." "We could pay her off," Evelyn said. "No," Daniel snapped, standing. "That never ends." They stared at each other, fear and resolve colliding. Then Evelyn did something unexpected. She stepped forward and hugged him. It was brief, fierce, human. "We'll fight," she said into his shoulder. Together. But outside the penthouse walls, someone else was already moving pieces into place. And the game had just turned ruthless. Sleep became a suggestion, not a state. Daniel lay awake on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling while the city breathed beyond the glass. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the air system, the distant traffic, the faint tick of a clock he hadn't noticed before. His mind replayed the lobby scene on a brutal loop. Laura's smile, the card hitting the marble, the way Emma's name had turned into a weapon. Across the hall, Evelyn hadn't slept either. She stood in her office with the lights low, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to the elbow. The fitted dress she'd worn all day still hugged her frame, a reminder of the armor she carried everywhere. But her posture, perfect as ever, couldn't hide the tension locked into her shoulders. She reviewed documents until the words blurred, then closed the tablet with controlled force. Paying Laura off would be easy. It would be clean. And it would poison everything. Evelyn crossed the penthouse and found Daniel in the kitchen, coffee mug untouched in his hands. "What can make her disappear?" she said quietly. "Legally. Financially." Daniel didn't look up. "That teaches Emma the wrong lesson. It teaches her safety. It teaches her that people can be bought," he countered. "And that fear wins." Evelyn leaned against the counter, the marble cool against her hip. "Hope doesn't win custody battles." "No," Daniel said, voice breaking despite his effort. But neither does selling your soul. Silence fell, thick, bruising. I'm not like you, he continued, lifting his eyes to hers. I don't have leverage. I don't have power. I have one thing, being there. And if I let money solve this, I lose that. Evelyn's jaw tightened. You think I solve everything with money? I think it's what the world taught you. The words landed harder than either expected. Evelyn straightened, confidence snapping into place. I'm trying to protect your daughter. And I'm trying to protect her future, Daniel replied. Including the kind of person she grows up believing she should be. For a moment, it looked like Evelyn might lash out. Instead, she exhaled. Slowly, controlled. Then we fight, she said. But we fight my way. Daniel nodded. With lawyers. With truth. She corrected. And preparation. The next 48 hours were relentless. Evelyn's legal team dissected old custody agreements line by line. Daniel provided timelines, records, testimony from neighbors and teachers. Every detail of his life was laid bare. Routine, sacrifice, presence. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. And solid was harder to tear apart. Evelyn coached him through the process like a general preparing a soldier for battle. Not with intimidation, but with precision. They will try to rattle you, she said, standing close, adjusting his tie before a meeting. Her touch was brief, steady, grounding. Don't take the bait. What if they bring you up? He asked. They will, she replied. Let me handle that. He studied her face, the confidence, the femininity she wore without apology, the subtle curve of strength in every line of her posture. You don't have to do this. I do, she said simply. Late on the second night, exhaustion finally won. They sat on opposite ends of the sofa, files spread between them, city lights painting Evelyn's silhouette in golden shadow. She loosened her hair, the movement instinctive, releasing some of the tension she refused to acknowledge. You know, Daniel said softly. You don't scare me. She glanced at him. Everyone says that until I do. No, he replied. You scare people who want something from you. And you don't. He shook his head. I want my daughter safe. Evelyn looked away, the admission settling into her bones. Outside, the rain returned. Harder now, louder. It drummed against the windows like a countdown. Laura had made her move. Gavin Holt would not be far behind. And somewhere in the spaces between contracts and courtrooms, Evelyn realized something unsettling. This fight wasn't just about custody anymore. It was about what she was willing to lose to protect the first real family she'd ever known. The attack didn't come from Laura. It came from inside. Evelyn Cross walked into her office Tuesday morning and felt it immediately. The wrongness in the air, the way silence gathered instead of receding. Her assistant's desk was empty. The blinds were half drawn. And sitting behind Evelyn's desk, legs crossed like he owned the place, was Gavin Holt. He smiled as if they were old friends. Good morning, Evelyn. She didn't slow. Get out of my chair. Gavin chuckled, unfazed, and lifted a manila envelope from the desk. We need to talk about your fiancé. Evelyn's pulse didn't spike. It went cold. What about him? She asked evenly. I did some digging, Gavin said, standing now, circling the desk like a predator with time. Turns out your elevator love story has inconsistencies. He slid the envelope across the polished surface. Photos spilled out. Not of contracts, not of signatures. Photos of Gavin and Laura Mercer sitting together at a high-end bistro, laughing, leaning in. A date disguised as coincidence. Evelyn stared at the images. You found her, she said. I found her. Gavin confirmed. Very talkative. Bitter, desperate, a perfect ally. Her jaw tightened. She told me everything, he continued. About Daniel's debt, his fear. How surprised she was to hear he'd landed a billionaire fiancé. Evelyn lifted her eyes to his. What do you want? Gavin's smile widened. The company. Silence pressed down. You step down, he said smoothly. Cite personal reasons. New family priorities. I take over as interim CEO. And Daniel? Evelyn asked. Gavin shrugged. Laura backs off. Custody dispute evaporates. Emma stays with her father. And if I refuse? Gavin's smile vanished. Then I fund Laura's legal war. Best lawyer's money can buy. We expose your sham marriage. We shred Daniel's credibility. He loses his daughter. You lose the company. He leaned in close. You end up alone. Evelyn felt it then, the trap snapping shut. She thought of Daniel reading bedtime stories, of Emma's drawings taped crookedly to stainless steel, of a home that had finally started to breathe. I need time, she said. You have 24 hours, Gavin replied, already buttoning his jacket. Tick-tock. When the door closed behind him, Evelyn sank into her chair. For the first time since she was 25, she didn't see a way to win. Daniel noticed something was wrong the moment Evelyn came home. She moved differently, quieter, slower. The confidence was still there, but it was stretched thin, like glass under pressure. She barely touched her food, barely spoke. Bored trouble? He asked carefully. She nodded. Something like that. Emma's laughter floated in from the living room, bright and unguarded. Evelyn watched the hallway. Then she made her choice. Daniel, she said softly. We need to talk about the contract. He froze. What about it? I'm ending it. The words shattered something fragile between them. He set his fork down slowly. Why? It's become complicated, she said, forcing distance into her voice. The board is unhappy. Laura. The optics. So that's it? He asked quietly. I'll transfer the remainder of the funds, she said quickly. Use it to fight Laura. Get away from here. Somewhere safe. I don't want the money, Daniel said. I want. He stopped. He saw it then. The way she wouldn't meet his eyes. The way her hands trembled just slightly. Understanding hit him like a blow. You're protecting us, he whispered. Evelyn's voice hardened. This was never real, Daniel. It was business. The lie tasted like blood. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, he said softly. I'll pack. He walked past her without another word. Evelyn waited until the bedroom door closed. Then she slid down the kitchen cabinets and cried, silent, wrecked sobs, on marble that had never felt so cold. Because to save his child, she had just destroyed her own heart. Daniel packed quietly. There was no shouting, no accusations, no slammed doors. The penthouse absorbed his movements without comment, marble and glass indifferent to the way his chest felt hollowed out. He folded clothes with mechanical care, placing them into the same suitcase he'd carried into Evelyn Cross's life weeks ago. Only now it felt heavier, weighted with everything he wasn't allowed to say. Across the hall, Evelyn stood perfectly still. She listened to the soft sounds of a life being dismantled, drawers sliding open, zippers closing, the muted thud of a suitcase set upright. Each sound landed like a counted loss. She told herself to stay where she was, to let the separation happen cleanly, to not make it harder than it already was. It didn't work. She walked to the doorway just as Daniel lifted the suitcase handle. He looked up, surprised, then guarded. The distance between them felt deliberate now, measured in choices, not steps. You don't have to leave tonight, she said. Yes, he replied gently. I do. The gentleness hurt more than anger would have. Emma's door was closed down the hall, a small sliver of light glowing beneath it. Daniel glanced that way, his jaw tightening. I told her we were going on a short trip. Evelyn nodded once. I had the car arranged. Thank you. They stood there, words stacking up and going unused. This wasn't your fault, Evelyn said, voice steady by force. You did everything you promised. Daniel searched her face, as if hoping to find the truth she was refusing to speak aloud. You didn't end this because it was complicated. No, she said. Because you don't do complicated, he continued. You do calculated. Her breath hitched, just slightly. I won't let him destroy you, she said. Be destroying us? Daniel asked softly. The silence answered for her. He nodded, accepting it the way he accepted most painful truths, without ceremony. I'll take care of her. I know. He hesitated, then added, take care of yourself too. She wanted to reach for him. She didn't. The motel room smelled like disinfectant and rain. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, while Emma watched cartoons on a flickering screen, volume low. She hadn't asked questions. She hadn't complained. That worried him more than tears would have. Daddy, she said suddenly. Did I do something wrong? His heart cracked. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her. No. Never. This isn't about you. Then why did we leave the big house? Daniel swallowed. Because sometimes adults have to fix problems quietly. She nodded, accepting that too easily. I liked her, Emma said. She was bad at frosting cupcakes. Daniel smiled despite the ache. She was. Emma leaned into him. Will we see her again? He didn't answer right away. I don't know, he said finally. But she wants you safe. Emma considered this. Then she's nice. Yes, Daniel thought. She is. Toucan Evelyn resigned at dawn. Not publicly. Not yet. She submitted the letter to the board with clipped professionalism, citing personal reasons, changing priorities. The need to step back before her birthday triggered the clause she could no longer fight without collateral damage. Gavin Holt responded within minutes. A wise choice. She didn't reply. The penthouse felt cavernous again, every sound echoing, every corner accusing. The refrigerator was bare except for bottled water. The hallway looked wrong without small shoes by the door. Evelyn dressed carefully that morning. A fitted black dress, tailored to her waist and hips, elegant and severe. Power as armor. She needed it today. At Cross Media Group, whispers followed her like shadows. She ignored them all, walking into the boardroom with her head high, posture immaculate, femininity sharpened into authority. She placed her signed resignation on the table. I'll stay through transition, she said, to ensure continuity. Gavin smiled like he'd already won. That afternoon, Daniel sat in the motel room staring at the check Evelyn had transferred, every cent she'd promised untouched. It sat on the nightstand like a dare. He thought of the way she'd looked when she lied to him, of the way her voice had hardened to save him from the truth, of how easily she'd chosen loss if it meant Emma would be safe. The pieces slid into place with terrible clarity. She hadn't ended the marriage. She had sacrificed it. Daniel stood so fast the chair tipped over. Emma, he said, grabbing his jacket. Get your shoes. She blinked. Where are we going? To save someone, he said, voice fierce with certainty. And this time, we're not leaving her alone. Outside, rain began again, steady, determined. Between the raindrops, the final act was already moving into position. The motel room shrank as certainty expanded. Daniel stood in the narrow space, with his jacket half on, heart pounding, the truth finally arranged into something sharp enough to act on. The check on the nightstand caught the flickering light from the television. Money meant to erase him from a war he hadn't agreed to start. He picked it up, folded it once, then again, as if the paper itself could be persuaded to mean something else. It didn't. Emma watched him quietly from the bed, legs crossed, Fox tucked under her arm. She sensed the shift, the way children always did when adults stopped pretending. Are we in trouble? She asked. No, Daniel said, kneeling to her level. His voice was calm, but there was a fire behind it now. We're going to help someone who helped us. Like when you fix Mrs. Paddle's sink, she asked. He smiled. Exactly like that? She nodded, already putting on her shoes. Trust without hesitation. That was the thing Laura never understood. That was the thing Evelyn had protected. Daniel called Mrs. Patel from the parking lot, rain ticking softly on the roof of the car. I need a favor, he said. Can you meet me at Cross Media in 20 minutes? A pause. Then, is everything all right? It will be. He hung up and drove. Evelyn Cross sat alone in the boardroom, hands folded, posture perfect. The men around the table talked to her as if she were already gone. Transition plans, interim structures, efficiency metrics. Gavin Holt leaned back in his chair, satisfied, already wearing ownership like a tailored suit. The resignation letter lay on the table in front of Evelyn, ink dry, decision made. She told herself this was victory by other means, that she was choosing safety over pride, that some empires were meant to be surrendered. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. She didn't look. Shall we proceed? The chairman asked. Evelyn picked up the pen. It felt heavier than it should have. Security tried to stop Daniel at the lobby. Mr. Mercer. The guard said apologetically, stepping into his path. I'm under orders. Daniel looked at the turnstiles. then back at the guard. Do you have kids? The man hesitated. A granddaughter. If someone was about to take her away, Daniel said evenly, and the only person who could stop it was upstairs about to ruin her own life to save yours. Would you wait here? The guard's jaw tightened. He swiped the card. Elevator B. He muttered. It's faster. Daniel ran. Tutu, the boardroom doors burst open with a sound like thunder. Every head turned. Evelyn's pen slipped from her fingers. Don't sign it, Daniel said, breathless, voice cutting through the room like a blade. Gavin surged to his feet. Security. They're busy? Daniel replied, stepping forward. So is the truth. He walked straight to Evelyn, stopping just short of touching her. You lied to me, he said softly. And you're terrible at it. Her eyes filled despite herself. You shouldn't be here. I know, he said. But you were willing to lose everything for my daughter. I'm not letting you do that alone. He turned to the board. Mr. Holt, Daniel continued, voice steady now, has been blackmailing the CEO. He coordinated with my ex-wife to manufacture a custody threat. He offered to make it disappear if Evelyn handed him the company. Gasps rippled. Gavin laughed sharply. This is absurd. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out the check. He tore it in half, then into quarters. The sound was small, final. I don't want her money, Daniel said. I want the truth on record. He met Evelyn's eyes. She didn't buy me. She saved us. The chairman stood slowly. Mr. Holt? He said, voice cold. Did you contact Mr. Mercer's ex-wife? Gavin sputtered. It was research. It was extortion. The chairman snapped. You're fired. Pending investigation. Security moved in. As Gowding was dragged out, shouting threats that no one listened to, the room seemed to breathe again. Daniel turned back to Evelyn. I don't want a safe life without you in it, he said quietly. I don't want a future that teaches my daughter to run from love. A tear slid down Evelyn's cheeks, uncontrolled, unashamed. I was trying to protect you, she whispered. I know, he said. No, let me protect you. The chairman cleared his throat. Ems Cross, your resignation. Evelyn looked around the table, then at Daniel, then at the life she'd almost given up. She picked up the letter and tore it cleanly in two. The sound echoed louder than applause. For the first time in years, Evelyn Cross chose herself, and the family she hadn't known she was allowed to want. After the boardroom emptied, silence rushed in like a held breath finally released. The long mahogany table still bore the scars of the confrontation. Papers out of place, chairs angled wrong, the faint echo of raised voices clinging to the walls. Evelyn Cross stood at the head of it, hands braced on the polished surface, shoulders squared by habit even as the storm inside her slowly settled. Daniel stayed close. Not touching, not crowding, just there. The chairman cleared his throat, his tone markedly different now. Mems Cross, the board will convene an emergency review. Mr. Holt's actions, if verified, constitute gross misconduct. They will be verified. Evelyn said calmly, I have records. He nodded. Until then, your position remains intact. Daniel felt the shift ripple outward, power recentering, gravity restored. When the room finally emptied, Evelyn exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. She straightened, smoothing the fabric of her fitted dress, reclaiming composure piece by piece. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, Daniel replied. I did. She turned to him, eyes searching his face, not for calculation this time, but for truth. You tore up the check. I tore up leverage, he said. There's a difference. A small, disbelieving laugh escaped her. You realize how rare that is in my world. I realize how necessary it was in ours. They left the building together. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist, the city washed clean in a way that felt symbolic without being sentimental. Cameras waited, of course, journalists sniffing blood in the water. But Evelyn held her head high, posture impeccable, femininity and authority balanced in the way she'd mastered long ago. Daniel walked beside her, steady, unhidden. No statements were made. None were needed. 2. The penthouse greeted them differently that night. Not with tension. With relief. Evelyn kicked her heels near the door, the sharp click echoing once before disappearing. Daniel set his jacket aside, scanning the space as if seeing it anew. The drawings on the fridge, the shoes by the door, the quiet proof that life had taken root here. Emma was already asleep, Mrs. Patel's gentle care evident in the neat blanket and the steady hum of the purifier. Daniel watched her breathe. "She's safe," Evelyn said softly from behind him. "Yes," he replied. "Because you chose her." She stepped closer. "Because you showed me how." They moved into the living room, city lights spilling in through the windows. For the first time since the contract began, there were no agendas left on the table. Just them. "I meant what I said," Daniel began. "I don't want a future built on fear." And Evelyn's expression softened, the steel easing without disappearing. "And I don't want a life where love is a liability." The space between them closed naturally this time. No cameras. No contract. When they kissed, it was slower. Deliberate, certain. A decision, not an impulse. Evelyn rested her forehead against his afterward, eyes closed. "We need to talk about what comes next." Daniel smiled faintly. "I was hoping you'd say that." Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, something finally settled into place. The fallout didn't wait for morning. It rolled in before dawn, carried on emails marked urgent, texts from numbers Ellen didn't save, and the quiet hum of a city that sensed blood in the water. Scandal had a smell, ozone and ink, and Cross media was saturated with it by sunrise. Evelyn woke before the alarms. She lay still for a moment, listening to the penthouse breathe. The air system whispered. Somewhere, a distant siren rose and fell. Beside her, Daniel slept on his back, one arm flung out, the lines in his face softened by rest he rarely allowed himself. She watched him longer than necessary. Power had always woken her early. Fear had kept her awake. This quiet, shared morning, felt dangerous in a way she hadn't learned to armor against. She slipped out of bed and dressed with care a fitted charcoal dress, tailored at the waist, skirt falling clean and decisive, heels chosen for stability rather than spectacle. Confidence refined, femininity intentional. She pulled her hair back, leaving a few soft strands loose, an unconscious concession she didn't correct. The phone buzzed. Alpha Chairman Ive emergency board session at 9. Media is circling. We need a unified position. Evelyn typed back 2 words. "I'll lead." In the kitchen, Daniel was already up, coffee poured, phone in hand. "They're coming for you," he said. She nodded. "They always do." "You okay?" She met his eyes. "Ask me after." The boardroom filled quickly, not with noise, but with tension. Legal counsel lined one wall, communications on the other. Faces that once looked at Evelyn with appraisal now watched her with recalibration. She stood at the head of the table, posture perfect, presence unmistakable. "What proceed with facts?" she said, before anyone else could speak. No speculation, no spin. A lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Holt's communications show coordination with Ms. Mercer's ex-wife. Financial transfers. Messaging. Then we release it," Evelyn said, fully. A murmur rippled. "That invites scrutiny," someone warned. "Transparency is not a weakness," Evelyn replied. "It's a firewall." The chairman nodded slowly. Agreed. At noon, the story broke, not as a rumor, but as a record. An executive removed for misconduct. A custody threat manufactured and exposed. A CEO who refused to trade a child's safety for corporate convenience. The narrative shifted. The press followed. Daniel spent the morning with Emma. They walked to the small park near the river, the air clean after rain, the world rinsed down to essentials. Emma kicked at wet leaves and told him about school, about a book she wanted to read again because the ending felt unfinished. "Some endings need help," Daniel said. She considered that. "Like when you glue the ripped page." "Exactly." Back at the penthouse, Mrs. Patel left with a warm squeeze of Daniel's hand. "She's lucky," she said. "So are you." He watched Emma color at the table. Careful lines, bright choices, and felt the truth of it settle. Evelyn came home late afternoon, not drained, focused. She set her bag down and loosened her jacket, the dress beneath still immaculate, confidence intact. Daniel looked up from the counter. "You won," he said. She shook her head. "We held." Emma looked up. "Hi." Evelyn smiled small, genuine. Hello. The evening unfolded without ceremony. Dinner. Homework. A story read twice because Emma asked. The penthouse glowed warmer than it ever had, light pooling where silence once ruled. After Emma fell asleep, Evelyn stood by the window, city lights catching the curve of her shoulders. The calm in her stance earned rather than assumed. They'll test me again, she said. Daniel joined her. They always do. And if they push, then we push back, he replied. Together. She turned to him. You're certain? He nodded. About this? Yes. Evelyn exhaled. A long release. Then I need to say something clearly. She took his hand. No scripts? No angles. This started as a contract, she said. It isn't anymore? I know. I don't want an escape clause. She continued. I want a commitment that scares me. Daniel smiled. Those are the only ones worth keeping. They kissed. Not urgent. Not secret. Just sure. Outside, the city kept score. Inside, they stopped playing defense. Victory didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly, like a door closing on a room that had been loud for too long. By the end of the week, the investigation concluded exactly as Evelyn had said it would. Gavin Holt's access was revoked. His name scrubbed from internal systems, his threats reduced to footnotes and legal filings. Laura's lawyer called once, then stopped calling altogether. The manufactured storm collapsed under the weight of evidence and daylight. Stability returned, not the brittle kind that came from fear, but the earned kind that came from truth. Evelyn stood at the head of the executive floor that Friday morning, addressing her senior team. She wore a fitted navy dress that balanced elegance and command, tailored to her waist, posture flawless, presence undeniable. The room listened, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. We'll move forward, she said, with clarity, with accountability, and with people who understand that power without ethics is a liability. No one argued. After the meeting, she found Daniel waiting near the elevators. No suit today. Just him. Grounded. Certain. Chairman wants you for lunch, he said. Celebratory, I think. She smiled faintly. I'll survive. They rode the elevator down together in companionable silence. You know, Daniel added, this is the part where people usually change. Evelyn glanced at him. In what way? They get sharper. Colder. Afraid to lose what they've reclaimed. She considered that. I already lost it once. And I don't intend to repeat the mistake. That afternoon, the penthouse filled with normalcy. Emma spread her homework across the table. Tongue caught between her teeth as she concentrated. Daniel cooked. Evelyn attempted to help and failed at slicing vegetables, earning a quiet laugh she pretended not to hear. I'm bad at this, she said. You're learning? Daniel replied. Emma looked up. That's what Daddy says about me in math. Evelyn smiled at her. Then I'll keep trying. The sound of laughter, soft, unguarded, settled into the walls. Later, when the city lights blinked on and Emma slept, Evelyn and Daniel stood in the living room with the windows open, cool air moving through the space like a reset. The contract, Evelyn said. Daniel waited. I had legal void it, she continued. Completely. No clauses, no contingencies. He nodded. Good. She took a breath. I don't want us defined by something that pretended to be love. He met her eyes. Then define it now. She stepped closer, confident, feminine, unafraid. I want a life that includes risk. Noise. A child's shoes by the door. Daniel smiled. I can do noise. And the rest? She asked quietly. He took her hand. The rest is easy. They kissed slow, deliberate, unhidden, not a declaration for anyone else, a promise made in private. Across the city, headlines shifted to the next spectacle. In the penthouse, something permanent took root. 1 year changed the shape of everything. It did not announce itself with milestones or ceremonies. It arrived quietly, in routines that held, in mornings that didn't begin with dread, in evenings that ended without contingency plans. The penthouse no longer felt like a set piece. It felt lived in. Daniel noticed it first in the small things. The refrigerator door bore magnets that didn't match. The couch had a throw blanket that didn't belong to any design language. The hallway held a framed photo Evelyn, had pretended not to notice when it appeared. A candid shot of the three of them laughing, slightly blurred, undeniably real. Evelyn noticed it in the larger ones. Board meetings ended without warfare. Decisions were debated instead of dominated. The company didn't just survive, it steadied. The culture shifted, subtly but unmistakably, toward something more human. She still demanded excellence. She just no longer demanded fear. Daniel's promotion came without fanfare. Vice President of Operations. Earned. Not gifted. He accepted it with the same calm resolve he brought to everything else, setting boundaries, delegating wisely, leaving work at work whenever he could. The office learned quickly that he was not to be underestimated. Kind, yes, unyielding when it mattered. Their relationship didn't turn perfect. It turned honest. They argued about schedules and priorities, about how much privacy was necessary and how much visibility was inevitable. They learned when to compromise and when to stand firm. They learned that love was not the absence of conflict, but the refusal to weaponize it. On a quiet Sunday morning, Daniel found Evelyn in the kitchen, standing barefoot on cool marble, one hand resting unconsciously against her abdomen. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled, a smile that reached somewhere deeper than confidence. "I think so." She took his hand and placed it where hers had been. The future made itself known in the smallest movement. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. Later that day, Evelyn stood at the window alone, city stretching endlessly below. Power still lived in her posture, in the certainty of her presence. But it was no longer solitary. She had kept her company. She had kept her integrity. And in doing so, she had gained something the board could never quantify. When Daniel joined her, she leaned back into him without thinking. "I used to believe safety came from control," she said quietly. "And now?" he asked. "Now I know it comes from choosing the right people," she replied. "And choosing them every day." He kissed her temple. "That's the hard part." "It's the only part worth doing," she said. The city outside moved on, endless, demanding, indifferent. Inside, a future waited. The morning light came softly. It slipped between glass and skyline, settling into the penthouse without urgency. No alarms, no headlines demanding attention, no meetings clawing at the edges of the day. Daniel woke first, as he always did, and lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet rhythm of a life that no longer felt borrowed. Beside him, Evelyn slept on her side, hair loose, expression unguarded. Without the armor of posture and precision, she looked younger, human in a way the world was never meant to see. Daniel watched her breathe and thought, not for the first time, that this was the real victory. Not the boardroom. Not the headlines. This. He slipped out of bed and padded into the kitchen. Emma was already awake. She sat at the counter in her pajamas, legs swinging, coloring with serious concentration. The fox sat beside her like a supervisor. "You're up early," Daniel said. She shrugged. "I had a dream. Good one or weird one?" "Both," she said thoughtfully. It had rain, but the rain wasn't scary. Daniel smiled. "I like those." Evelyn appeared in the doorway a moment later, wearing one of Daniel's shirts. Too long, soft, unmistakably domestic. The fabric skimmed her figure without effort, confidence now something she wore naturally rather than assembled. She leaned against the frame, watching them with an expression that had become familiar, quiet wonder. "Good morning," she said. Emma looked up. "Miss Evelyn."
"Yes."
"When it rains now, are we safe?" Evelyn crossed the room without hesitation and knelt so they were eye level. "Yes," she said clearly. "We are." Emma nodded, satisfied, and returned to her drawing. Daniel met Evelyn's eyes over the counter. No contracts, no calculations, just truth. The ceremony was small. No press, no board members, no performance. Just a quiet rooftop garden overlooking a city that had taken enough from both of them already. A few trusted friends, Mrs. Patel. Laughter that didn't echo for effect. Vows spoken without scripts or contingencies. When Evelyn took Daniel's hand, there was no fear in her grip. Only certainty. "I spent years believing love was a weakness," she said, voice steady. "But you showed me that love is structure. It's resilience. It's choosing to stand when walking away would be easier." Daniel swallowed. "You showed me that strength doesn't mean standing alone. It means letting someone stand with you. Emma clapped first. Naturally. Life didn't turn perfect. It turned real. Evelyn still ran an empire, but she left the office on time more often than not. Daniel still worked hard, but he never missed bedtime. Emma grew stronger, louder, braver, her laughter threading through rooms that had once known only silence. On rainy evenings, they built blanket forts. On quiet nights, they talked about nothing and everything. And sometimes, when the city outside blurred into lights and water, Evelyn would stand by the window and remember the woman she used to be, the one who thought survival meant isolation. She no longer missed her, because between the raindrops, she had found something far more valuable than power. She had found home. If this story moved you, if you believe that love is not a weakness, but the bravest choice we ever make, support stories like this. Hit the like button so this story can reach others who need it. Subscribe for more emotional, meaningful stories about healing, sacrifice, and found family. And tell us in the comments, do you believe love can change destiny? Saracen, until the next story, stay safe, stay kind, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let yourself be loved.